Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Discover Your Child Learning Strengths. We are thrilled to be joined by today's host, Mariaemma Willis. Mariaemma is co-founder of Learning Success Institute and co-author of the Self-Portrait Power Traits Assessment and the books Midlife Crisis Begins in Kindergarten and Discover Your Child's Learning Style. If you have any questions during this webinar, please type them in the chat box. Once Mariaemma is finished with her presentation, we will answer as many as possible. And with that, I will turn it over to Mariaemma Willis.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. So nice to be here. So I'm going to click share right now so that we can get started with the PowerPoint. Okay. Is that working?
It sure is.
All right, great. Okay, so this is Power Traits for Life, Discover Your Child's Learning Strengths. And we're starting with a little cartoon here. So the little bubble says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And of course, we can see that there are some critters there that are not going to be able to climb the tree. So this is comes from a quote by Albert Einstein. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Well, many of you might have heard this one before. It's been circulating around for a long time. And of course, in our traditional schools, pretty much everybody has to do the same thing at the same time, and they're all judged by the same standards. We don't really look at people's strengths, how they learn differently, their talents, their interests, and everything that goes into making them a unique person and having their own genius. So we know that in homeschooling, we are pretty free to not do that, not get into that. So are we going to focus on strengths or weaknesses? Often children are told to focus on their weaker subjects and not spend so much time on the ones they do well in. Now, this is a quote from the book, The Power of Focus. So these guys say, wrong. This does not give you a competitive edge. It just keeps you average. In fact, it's an absolute insult to your integrity to major in minor things. And a couple of the authors here are pretty well known. Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield are the co-authors of the whole Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Anyway, we hope that in homeschooling, people are confident to do, to break out of that mold of having to have the same workbooks, the same textbooks, all of that, the requirements. You have to do this, you have to do that. By the time you're in second grade, you're supposed to be doing this. And by the time you're in fifth, you're supposed to be able to do this. And it really just doesn't work that way. So if you're not so confident about breaking out of that, because I know a lot of parents, they want to do that, and you are thinking that that is the right thing to do, but still it's a little scary because you probably went to traditional school. It's all you know. Everybody around you is going to traditional school, and sometimes you have people in your life, friends, relatives, that are kind of saying, what are you doing? Are they able to do this workbook? How come they're not doing this textbook? How come they're not studying this year? So you want to get to be really confident about that so that you're doing the right thing. And, get your questions down now, because if you're coming up with questions, you might not remember them at the end, but this is a big subject and I really want to be able to answer any questions about it. So here's a more effective approach, and this is a quote from Arthur Levine, past president of Columbia Teachers College. In the future, the teacher will no longer be the talking head at the front of the classroom, but the expert in children's learning styles comparable to a medical doctor. And that's really what we're talking about, is taking that young child and, really discovering what is that genius inside of you? What are your talents? What are your gifts that you're going to give the world? And those are the same things that are going to help you learn whatever it is that you need to learn. So your strengths are your blueprints for success. And a primary job of parents is to guide their children in discovering those unique gifts. Your children's gifts are their blueprints for life success. And that's what guides them to discerning who they are and to becoming confident adults and eager to contribute to the world. Oops. There we go. All right. So here's an example of untapped brilliance. Dennis the Menace says, I got a lot of answers, but no one ever asked the right questions. And that's because, again, in a traditional classroom, and you could have just traditional school at home. Just because you're sitting at home doesn't mean that it's going to be any different. So if it is traditional, there are so many students sitting there. Maybe you were one of them, or maybe your spouse or one of your siblings was one of those who just sat there and thought, well, what about this? I know about that, and I know about that, and nobody's ever asking me about that. So we need to tap into all of these areas of brilliance. So discouragement and low self-esteem, they often begin with school, and school can be anything. Kids are judged so much by how they do in their academics. The self-images they develop while learning stay with them and affect their whole lives. You ask any adult how school was, most of them will tell you that it was not a great experience, and things that they learned there about themselves in terms of how smart they are, how capable they are, stay with them forever. They might say, well, when I was in third grade, my teacher said this, and I never liked math again, or I never thought I could do math, and I still can't do math. So you don't want that for your child. But if you learn growing up that you're not very smart, you're not good enough, you have nothing to contribute, or actually that you are a failure, because a lot of students learn that, then that's what you will believe as an adult. So children often hear things like, if your spelling doesn't improve, you can't be on that team. Those are great ideas, but your writing is so messy. You need to be more responsible and study harder. Finally, you got a B. Next time, get an A. No playing outside until you finish your homework, but it could also be just your regular work in the homeschool setting. You might be good at, and you can fill in the blank, but that won't get you far in life. Or this one we hear a lot, if you don't take school seriously, you'll never get anywhere. This is often said to preschoolers, not only by teachers in the system, but I've heard homeschoolers say these kinds of things as well. So it's all based on fear, and I want to get that fear away from you. I wish we were all in the same room, because right now I know that I'm imagining the different reactions, because we get them when we're live at a workshop. And I know that some of you are laughing a little bit, or some of you are like, oh no, I say that, or please help me not be stuck in that kind of thinking. So we also hear things like, you have to go to college, you have to get into a top university, we expect you to become whatever you're going to fill in the blank with, or the family business, or forget whatever it is they love. All the good jobs are in technology. That's not a real job. How will you support yourself? You want to do what? So again, let's put a different set of eyes on and switch our perspective a little bit and see what happens. So here is a report card that says his work has been far from satisfactory. Several times he's been in trouble because he will not listen, but will insist on doing his work in his own way. I believe he has ideas about becoming a scientist. On his present showing, this is quite ridiculous, It would be a sheer waste of time, both on his part and of those who have to teach him. And this was the high school report card of John Gurdon, winner of the 2012 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. And we all know that there are a lot of stories like this of people that didn't do well in school and they thrived in real life. And the thing is that it's a very small percentage of people who don't really listen to these kinds of messages that are given to them and go on to do what they need to do and to bring their gifts to the world. Most people, when they get these messages, they give up, and we don't want that for our children. So here are positive messages. I love how creative you are. You're so funny. You make us laugh. If that's what you choose, I'll help you get there. Let's figure out if college is right for you, or which college. I know some people freak out at even the idea that if college is right for you, but it's true. College is not for everyone. Let's come up with ideas to improve spelling. How about if you take a break? And I love this, focusing on the positive. So that the teacher says Sarah needs to work on her handwriting. And the mom is thinking, oh, my child's going to be a doctor. So get a little humor in there. Now, how do we overcome all this and become confident coaches for our children and empowering them? That's why we call them power traits, focusing on their strengths. So your children's strengths come from these areas. And this is based on our self-portrait assessment. So there are dispositions, modalities, talents, interests, and environment. And then what's coming up now are all the different parts of each of these. And we're going to talk about them in a second. You don't have to try to write all these down. And actually, most of this is also at the Homeschool Buyers website. And I'll tell you later where you can go to see that. But these are like adjustable seats. So you get in the car, you get on a plane, you get, wherever, and you're adjusting the seat for a younger child or for a taller adult or a shorter adult. And that's what this is. We're adjusting the seats so that that person can go to their potential. We're using their strengths. We're counting on their strengths. So here we go. So the disposition power traits are the learning personalities. This is what others see about us. These traits show up at an early age, 2 or 3 years old, and they affect how we learn, work, and communicate. So these are the short versions of each of these, the short descriptions. Spontaneous. The key word here is move. These people have to move. And fun and games motivates them the most, and that's how they learn the best, through those things. And the curious disposition, the key word is question. They question, how does this work? And what happens if I do this? And what about this? And what if I took this apart? And they love to discover and tinker, and that's how they learn best, by doing those things. The supportive person's key word is interact. Their best way of learning is by discussing, collaborating, interacting with others. The imaginative disposition's keyword is wonder. They do their best when they can take their time to create and imagine and wonder about things. And then there's the organized person. That's the person that wants to plan, structure, step by step. And most school settings, even homeschool, are set up for the organized person. So very often it's the spontaneous person that gets the label hyperactive. The curious person is often labeled ADD. The supportive person can be labeled disruptive because they tend to be chatty. They want to discuss with others in order to learn. The imaginative person is also often labeled ADD. I can talk some more about this in a little bit. And this is the perfect disposition for the traditional learning setup, the organized disposition. Okay, I'll let you kind of digest that for a second. So here's the thing. The majority of inventors, scientists, entrepreneurs, musicians, poets, philosophers, artists, and creative people are generally a mix of curious, spontaneous, and imaginative. These are the students who are often labeled ADD, ADHD, dyslexic, and learning disabled. They experience failure almost daily in a traditional school setting, and we hope that that's not the case in the homeschool setting, because it can be if you're only using traditional methods and materials. They don't realize how smart they are. They don't know they have unlimited possibilities. They grow up believing they have nothing to contribute. Now, let's look at a different way of doing this. So what if we met the needs of these different dispositions? So here's one lesson, an ocean study about oceans. And that first icon there represents the curious. So what if they could invent, draw, or make a new kind of sea creature and adapt it to a specific environment? Now, these are just examples just to give you some ideas. But the key words are invent, draw, make up something. List, the second one is the organized person, and they love lists usually. They love lists, checking things off. So list the major oceans and seas of the world and write 6 important facts, about each. The next one is the imaginative, draw, paint, or make a scrapbook or collage to show 6 of the ocean elements. The supportive, work with 2 or 3 other people. They love collaborating, create an underwater resort, create a brochure or poster. So the idea here is that people are working together to come up with a wonderful thing. And then the spontaneous might write a rap song or do a skit, a presentation comparing lakes and seas and rivers. So these are examples of how you can take one lesson, one study, and meet the needs of the different dispositions. Now, the next part is the modality power traits. This is our information processing equipment, and it has to do with the best way for your brain to take in and process ideas, information, and learning of any kind. So the listening and verbal modalities, the listening one is pretty easy. These are the people who need to hear the voice of others. That's easy to understand, but it could also include audiobooks, lectures, and videos. But interestingly, some people that are very auditory, the visual would distract from that. So they might put a video on, close their eyes, and listen only. Audiobooks are great for listening learners. But then this one is not so often thought about. The verbal needs to hear the sound of one's own voice. And so that can happen by talking to yourself, for one, by teaching and explaining something to others, by reading aloud to yourself and discussing with others. Now, this verbal person can get into trouble, especially in a classroom environment, but also in the homeschooling environment, because they tend to need to talk out loud. So they might start reading their book out loud, or the instructions on some worksheet out loud, and everybody else is saying, "You're bothering me, be quiet, I'm trying to study." And also they might do something like this. They might have something they're working on, and they run up to you and say, "I don't understand what I'm supposed to do." And you say, well, read what it says. And they read it and they say, "Oh, I get it. Okay." And then they go back and do whatever. And then a few minutes later, they come back and they say, "I don't understand what I'm supposed to do." And you say, "Well, read it." So they read it out loud. And then they say, "I get it." And they go back, and you think, oh, for heaven's sakes, they just, are disruptive, or they just want to bounce up and down. But really what's happening is they're hearing their own voice. And if they just knew that that's what worked, and you knew that's what worked, you could encourage them to do that. And then they could also learn to do it in a way that doesn't bother other people if there are other people around doing things where they need quiet. So these are all great learning experiences for the whole family. If everybody takes the self-portrait and knows, it doesn't have to be our system of the self-portrait, but if you know more about the learning needs of each member of the family, then there's not so much arguing and thinking that people are doing things on purpose just to be mean to you, or they're being inconsiderate and that kind of thing. But you can talk as a family about how to arrange the settings so that people get what they need. Some people need quiet. Do they need to put on earphones or go to a different room or have different sections to do their work? And this can also work for the adults, because the adults in the house also have these needs, and maybe even have a home office and there's too much noise for you, or one spouse needs music to get their work done and the other one wants total quiet. So when you understand what everybody needs, you can talk about how to do that so that everybody's needs are met. Now, 85% of traditional instruction requires excellent listening skills. 22% of learners have these skills. So if you're following the same model as a traditional classroom in your homeschool, then this is what's happening as well in your setting. Now, the picture modality is pretty easy to understand too. They need to see pictures, illustrations, images, charts, graphs, videos, maps. Flashcards with words on them do not work for a picture learner because words are not pictures. So I can talk some more about that. If somebody has a question, I will go into more detail about that. But just know that using flashcards for spelling or learning words for reading is not the best way to work with a picture learner. The print learner loves books, any kind of books, maybe newspapers, internet research, and flashcards. They love that. Now, 95% of school studies require excellent print skills, and about 14% of students are print learners. So again, in your homeschool setting, think about this, because if your student is low in print modality and high in some of the others, then you can work out how to meet that child's needs better. Now, the movement modalities, we have 4. Whole body. They need to just be in their whole body, building and experiencing things, going on that field trip, moving. The hands-on person needs to take things apart or make something. Working with their hands is the key. The sketching learner, drawing and doodling, really helps them even to listen. So you can experiment with this. I have a lot of parents who say to me, oh my gosh, I'm trying to talk, or I'm reading something, and he's just doodling or drawing the whole time. And I keep saying to, stop that and listen to me. But then they add, well, when I checked to see if he heard, he knew everything I said. And they processed it and they get it. So it's just that we are so entrenched in some of the beliefs we have about how learning is supposed to happen, that even when we see that our child's method is working, we're nervous about that. Well, okay, yeah, she heard everything I said, she gets it, she understands it, but are you really supposed to be able to just doodle while somebody else is talking or while you're listening to the audiobook? And the answer is yes. If that works for you, that's great. The writing learner is the traditional learner who learns from taking notes, making outlines, writing the words over and over, and those kinds of things. So since I mentioned that about writing words over and over, that's another thing that does not work. If your child is not a writing learner, writing their spelling words over and over will not work. And if somebody wants to talk some more about that, then ask me that question and we'll talk some more later. 50 to 60% of students are whole body, hands-on learners. So chances are you have some in your home, and maybe you're one yourself. Now, these are ways that students get in trouble for their modality needs. Oops, here we go. We're just going to recap here a little bit. So for auditory, listening is the thing that we have, you know, for school. I mean, so this is the perfect setup for school. If you're a listening, print, writing learner. Okay? Now, that's the magic formula, but not everybody has that magic formula. So the verbal person under auditory that needs to say it, we already talked about why they might get in trouble by being overly talkative or needing to say something out loud. Then the visual category, the picture learner, needs to see it. Again, if they're not getting it so much through print, then, you know, I have get in trouble in quotes, meaning that they look like they can't learn very well, but all we have to do is switch to the picture modality and then they will thrive. And then under movement, writing is the one that is expected in traditional learning, and yet hands-on whole body sketching together, they make 50 to 60% of the population. So we need to really look at this and think, okay, do they need to touch and do and get up and move around and even doodle. Now, interest power traits, these are our greatest motivators. By the way, I'm going to, the whole presentation will be about 40 minutes, so we have about 10 more minutes, and then we'll have time for all the questions. So these are our greatest motivators. A person will work very long and hard when the topic is of interest. So I know that a lot of people get nervous about this too. Well, if we're only giving them things that they like, or, you know, catering to their needs, catering to their interests, they won't learn any discipline, et cetera, et cetera. That is just not true, because when you are working in your strengths, in your areas of greatest interest, those are your greatest motivators. And you are going to just, if you're interested in something, you're going to go all out for that. They've even interviewed parents of Olympic winners and found that in those families, sometimes the person that is, you know, that Olympic winner did not have the greatest talent in that family for that thing, whatever it is. And yet this was the person who loved it so much that they were out there at 5 in the morning practicing, and it was just, they were just relentless about it. So those are greatest motivators. If you can tap into your child's interests, a lot of learning will go on. And then you can relate that to whatever topic is, you know, you think they need to cover. So interest will drive learning when nothing else will. It can outdo talent. So whenever possible, allow students to link their learning to their interests. Now here's the little bit of the sad part, that interests are often considered privileges to be taken away if students don't do what they're supposed to do, like do better on your spelling test or get that math finished. And we need to change our concept of how we work with all of this and how we relate all these things to each other, because this strategy leads to resentment rather than motivation, and many students give up on their interests altogether. They grow up to be adults who have no idea what they like or believe their interests have no value. Instead, you can integrate interests with the subjects being studied: the chemistry of cooking, the history of horses, the physics of skateboarding, make a journal, photojournal for literature, put on skits, create games, etc. The environment power traits can be very powerful. Sometimes we don't think about this, but our surroundings can greatly affect our ability to think, learn, and work. And they can easily be taken for granted. And yet often simple changes can greatly improve learning ability. So let's look at a few of these. So there's the background sounds, music, noise, or quiet. Body position, does it help to sit, to recline, to stand? A lot of people do better when they can stand up at a tall table. Lighting, bright, natural, or dim. Temperature can greatly affect some people. Colors, if you're around colors that you can't stand, for some people that really affects their ability to concentrate. Time of day can make a difference. Groupings, being alone, in twos, working in threes or small groups, and snacks. Some people really need to have some snacks throughout the day and some don't. Now, not all of these things affect everybody. And for some people, their environment is nothing. It's like they don't care. It doesn't bother them at all. They could learn or work anywhere. For other people, 1, 2, or 3 of these things might really make a difference. I remember one mom who had read our book and saw the thing about color and realized that her child hated black, and the table was black. And so she looked at her favorite color and decided to put the favorite color on the table. So what was going on was that this child was doing homework and just took hours and hours to do homework at this table where she did it. So they switched the color to her favorite color and everything changed. She just sat there and did it and was done, and that was it. So again, that's not going to be for everybody, and some people don't care. It doesn't affect them, but for some people, it can make quite a difference. The preferences of traditional schooling and environment is quiet, sitting at a desk, and being alone. A lot of times we think that's what we need to do in our homeschool setting as well. But again, we need to look at the individual needs of each of our students. Now, the talent power traits, these are natural gifts, skills or ease for learning or doing something. They make us stand out in a crowd, and they're not always things we're interested in pursuing. So that's the tricky part. So if you're forcing students to pursue their talents that they're not interested in, or failing to encourage students to pursue talents that they are interested in. So it's like two sides of the coin. Sometimes we think, you're so good at piano, you just really have to do something with that talent. But maybe they like piano, but maybe they're not interested in doing something huge with that. On the other hand, somebody might be interested in piano and people are saying, oh, well, that won't get you anywhere. You need to do this. So we need to be very careful because, again, what is the student interested in, so we can combine talents and interests to see what will be the most powerful, what will have the most powerful effect on their motivation and learning. So here's some of the talents: music, word language, math logic, mechanical, 3D, body coordination, self-care, people talent, nature talent, animals, humor, and life enhancement. Now, here are the laws for successful learning. Learning doesn't have to hurt. Success leads to more success, and coaching brings out the star. And I just want to say something about that second one. Well, first of all, the first one, we always think, no pain, no gain. Not true. Success leads to more success. A lot of people think that if you really, for some kids, it's never enough. So they learn to a certain level. Maybe it's math that is not their natural talent, and that's it. And we just want to push because you have to be perfect. You have to be perfect. And so every day they feel like they're failing in that. And sometimes we think that if we say things like, If you don't do that, you'll never get anywhere. If you don't get this, you're not going to get the job you want. That's not going to lead to success. What will lead to success is them seeing that they can be successful in something or anything, or sometimes everything, because you can be successful to certain levels really in anything. So this is part of what we want to be as parents, as coaches for them, to bring out that star in every child. And this approach leads to engagement, motivation, confidence, endurance, and contribution, which when we ask parents, these are the things they always say they want for their children. That shirt, if you're not able to read it, says, "I'm going to change the world." So for more information, we're going to get to the questions in a second here. This is our book, Discover Your Child's Learning Style. It's available anywhere, bookstores, Amazon. And then the Homeschool Buyers Co-op, they have a few pages there that you can look at. So it's called Learning Dispositions, Your Child's Learning Personality. And there is a lot of information there about each of the different dispositions. And also there are materials that have been reviewed by me that tell you what learning needs they meet, those specific materials. So that's the exact URL of the page that these are on. If you want to jot that down, basically it's the Homeschool Buyers Co-op and then / Learning Styles Overview. And then we have a back to school special for our assessment, which is gives you all of these areas that I've been talking about. The self-portrait power traits assessment is for 8 years and up. If your child cannot read yet, or is or even is older and is a delayed reader, they can still take it as long as they can understand it with you reading the questions to them. So you would read it to them, and then they would answer. Let them answer, and then you would choose what they're asking you to choose. So the HSB price, the normal one, is $19.95 each, and until July 18th, they will be $10 each. So our normal price, if you just go to selfportraitonline.com, you'll see it's $35. So your Homeschool Buyers Co-op price is always $19.95, but until July 18th, $10 each. There is a code. I think it's been coded in. Anyway, we can ask about that when I'm finished here in a second. So you get that code, and then that's how you get the $10. All right, here's the final thought. This is called You Are a Marvel by Paulo Casals. Each second we live is a new and unique moment of the universe, a moment that will never be again. And what do we teach our children? We teach them that 2 and 2 make 4, and Paris is the capital of France. When will we also teach them what they are? We should say to each of them, do you know what you are? You are a marvel. You are unique. In all the years that have passed, there's never been another child like you. Your legs, your arms, your clever fingers, the way you move. You may become a Shakespeare, a Michelangelo, a Beethoven. You have the capacity for anything. Yes, you are a marvel. And when you grow up, can you then harm another who is like you, a marvel? You must work, we must all work, to make the world worthy of its children. And that's it. So I'm going to click stop share here. Here we go.
Thank you so much, Mariaemma. That was absolutely fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
So if anybody has any questions, they can enter them in the chat box now, and we will get to as many as we possibly can. But I would like to lead off with one that I'm very curious about. So if you have a homeschooler that you've been teaching, you've been able to teach them towards their learning style and specific needs, is there any way to prepare them to enter a more traditional learning style? Say they're going to college where they might have to be the listener writer?
Yes, sure. And so this is interesting. I'm glad you asked this because for one thing, studies have shown that when you meet the learning needs of a homeschooled child, I mean, when you're homeschooling and you're able to meet their learning needs, they're the ones who do the best in college because they know what they need to learn. So I know it sounds like counterintuitive, but it's true. Because first of all, they're totally confident that they can learn. And secondly, as you're working with them, they're learning, oh, okay, well, if I need to, maybe I need to put this to a rhyme or a song to memorize this. And so, yes, you can let them know what it's going to be like in college. And in fact, many homeschoolers take a college class here and there, which is an excellent thing to do because then they can see what it's like. So when they're doing that, this is another great learning experience that you can help them with. So let's say they're taking an English class at college while they're in high school. And then they can come home and you can discuss what's going on. Okay, so maybe they're not a listening learner. What do they need to do? And then you go back to their self-portrait assessment, or even if you don't have that, anything that they know about themselves of how they learn best. And they can bring that home. And also, here's the other thing. In college, they don't have the same rules that they do, in elementary schools and even high schools. So for example, you can usually record whatever the professor is saying. You can record the whole lecture. Or nowadays, a lot of them record it themselves and then you go online, you can listen to it again. So if this is a student that needs to translate that, they can listen to it again and figure out, okay, what do I need to make this work? Do I need to draw pictures? Do I need to do a transcript and type it out and maybe highlight it? So these are all things that you can learn to help them learn to do. Whereas none of this is done ever in school. So if they're not good at elementary and they're not good at high school, they're not going to be good at college either because they never will have learned what works for them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I have another question for you from Amanda, who actually has two questions. So first, how can you accommodate a spontaneous, curious, verbal student when their movements and speaking are distracting to siblings learning together in a one-room schoolhouse-style homeschool environment?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, if it is possible to separate out, that would be great. If there's a little alcove somewhere, or even one of them that person can be in their own room for a little while. See, these are things to talk about at a family meeting. But here's the thing, when everybody understands what each of them is like, now you can talk about something. So what did you say it was? Spontaneous, curious, verbal?
Spontaneous, curious, verbal, exactly.
Yeah, so that is an interesting combination because they need to move, they need to talk, they need to ask questions. They learn best by asking tons of questions. That's the curious part, and it can drive you crazy. So if you have the learning styles of all the kids and the parents, now you can sit down and talk and you can say, okay, looks like you need all this stuff. Is that right? Does that sound like, does that sound right to you? Okay, now your sister needs blah, blah, blah. And so then you're talking about all things that each of them needs. And it would be great if they all have their results in front of them, if they're older and they can, read them, etc. And so now you can say, wow, how are we going to work this out? And you would be surprised that the kids will probably have better ideas than you have. And they'll figure out what they need to do. Like one of them might say, oh, well, you know what? When I'm doing this, whatever it is, maybe when I'm doing my art class, I don't care if he's talking. So that's fine. But when I'm doing math, I really need quiet. And so then the other person can say, well, okay, but I really need to ask questions while I'm learning. So where am I going to do that? And then you work it out together. So sometimes it's putting earphones on the people who need to be quiet. If you're all in the same room and you can't split up, or earplugs. So, that can work as well, but it is important to talk about it. And these are things that are going to follow your kids through adulthood and into their jobs, because they're going to learn, if I work at this tech company or this office or wherever I'm working, some people need quiet. I might need music. I might need noise. What are we going to do? As well as figuring out maybe that's not a setting where I can work. So this also helps with sort of starting to think about your, vocation and where do you want to be? Do you need an outside job where you're moving all the time? And it really helps you plan for your life in many, many ways. So I hope that answers some of the thing about the, one-room schoolhouse.
Well, I found that to be very informative. Amanda's second question is, the assessment states that it's ages 8 to adult, but is there any way to adapt it to a non-reading 6-year-old?
You could take it for them. We do have, a observation self-portrait that is a check-off assessment. So the parent, based on their observations, checks it off, and then you have an idea of what they're like. So it's in our book. So if you have the book, Discover Your Child's Learning Style, there's a link there that takes you to that part where you can download that.
Wonderful. And we've gone through your book and the learning style assessment, but Marcia would like to know what other resources might be available to help know which type of learner my child might be.
So there are, actually there are free ones online if you just put in learning styles. The difference is that they're not as in-depth and they always only do the modality. And they don't split out the modality. They just do visual, auditory, and tactile kinesthetic. So they don't split them out to show like, are you verbal or listening? Are you print or picture, etc. But if you wanted to start there, you certainly could.
Awesome. And then we have a very interesting scenario from, and please excuse me if I butcher your name, I believe it's Taranisa. And she says that she homeschools her 7-year-old son alone, and he's spontaneous, curious, and verbal, but he also doesn't mind having fun alone. He's recently gotten into chess, but since her abilities are pretty limited, he plays a lot online. How much would you say is too much time on that application? She usually lets him play until she can see that she's getting frustrated. And her name's Tara.
Okay, so I lost a little bit of it there. So she likes to play online. Is that what you said?
Her 7-year-old son plays chess.
Okay.
But she usually stops him when he's getting frustrated. Do you have any suggestions for the amount of time he should spend like playing and learning alone? And
so he plays chess online?
Yes. And he's an only child, so he's by himself when he's learning.
So, hold on, I'm sorry, my phone, sorry about that.
Oh, no, don't be. It's not a live webinar unless something happens.
Okay, so first of all, curious disposition needs alone time as well. So the curious people are not so much into working together with others. Spontaneous likes an audience. So we're going to balance the liking the audience with the curious that needs lots of time to do projects and things like chess, because they love solving things that they're interested in. So if he plays chess online, I mean, you know, we all know that hours and hours of screen time is not good for developing eyes and all sorts of things in the kids that are growing. So I would say that, I mean, I don't know how the game works. So if you can pause it, I would say for him to get up and stretch every 20 minutes or so at least, and run around and do something and then come back. If you can't pause it because you're in the middle of a game, again, I don't know how it works, then you would have to, I would say, limit it to an hour maybe. And then maybe he can go back again later. And looking for when he's frustrated, that could be, you know, a way of doing it as well. But I do get a little nervous about being online more than an hour at a time without a break. So I'm not sure if I'm answering her question, but I do want to say that we have lots of geniuses who needed a lot of time alone, and people were, you know, their parents were nervous about it, like people like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, who are all probably imaginative and curious dispositions. And they were really always imagining and coming up with things in their minds, and they needed a lot of alone time. So that in itself is not bad, but we do want to get some social things and exercise. We do want them to go outside and be in nature, not just be inside all the time. So it's that balance of meeting the needs of that child as well as what you know is good for them health-wise.
Wonderful. And again, our attendees, I encourage, Tara says thank you. I encourage you to put anything else you have in the chat box. In the meantime, I'm going to ask another question, which if I'm homeschooling my child and their learning style is dramatically different from my own, is there anything I can do to better understand how they interact with learning?
Yes, well, I would just say the more that you learn about it, the better, because my own dispositions are organized. That's my top one. I was an A student in school from the minute I started till when I finished with my master's. I didn't always love school, but I could do it. So if I can, if I can do it with students, then so can you. So you don't have to be the same as your students. You just have to understand that they need something else. And just because you get it this way doesn't mean that that's the best way. So I know that a lot of homeschooling parents are organized and supportive combination. That's my combination. And it kind of makes sense, because if you're organized, you might tend to want it to, if you like the idea of homeschooling, you would tend to want to do that. And supportive, of course, as well, interacting with your children and just, the caring that goes into that. So it makes sense. But remember that 50 to 60% of people are the movement picture learners. They're not print learners. They're not even listening learners. So if you just learn to understand they need something different, you try it and you see it works, then you start to feel a lot better about that. You go, okay, well, that's how they learn. It's fine. It's just not how I learn. And you can talk about that too. You can tell, I learned this way, because if everybody takes that self-portrait or whatever assessment you might want to take, then, you have the results for everybody and you can really compare. And if you're not taking any assessment at all, just sit down as a family, start talking about what are the different talents and interests and skills and abilities of each of them. What do they each bring to the family, and you can talk about it that way.
Wonderful. And we have another great question. What do you do with a child who seems to be every learning style? My daughter is 7 and all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Every once in a while, we do get somebody who's almost equal on everything. And I would say for this type of child that you just want to have her take the lead, really, because they, even though it's a little scary, they really know best what they need. So give her broad strokes. Let her kind of experiment with things. And if you can identify 3 or 4 interests and really capitalize on those, that would be a good place to start.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everybody out there will join me in thanking Mariaemma for her time today. I'm going to steal the screen share for a moment. We do have a special link for the $10, oops, wrong screen, of course. Right, and then you panic and you don't know how to operate your thing anymore. Stop share. Whoo, gotta love a technical difficulty, everyone. But we do have a special link for the $10 learning style assessment that we mentioned. And so I just wanna pop that up for you. And I'm doing that right now. Is everybody saying the proper link? I hope.
Yeah,
So, oh, great. So it's homeschoolbuyers.org/learning-style/assessment/sale. But if you just, go to the co-op and search for it, it'll pop right up for you. My share and say thank you very, very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, great. And I have to say, just personally, I really loved this topic. I think it's just so fascinating. So I'm sure everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did. And with that, we will say goodbye to everyone and have a great day.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you.